taking it all. Diving deep into topics, we'll rise or we'll fall. Every episode's a journey, a ride through the maze. Join us on this path, let's ignite the blaze. So grab your headphones tight, let's go for a ride. With every spin and twist, we'll cut and run and hide. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and culture, oh what a blend. Join on the journey, let's set the trend.
Okay, so I have been reading articles by this lady named Maria Popova, and she just has this incredible podcast out there called the Marginalian. I got to get that right.
Okay.
She talks about not sparing yourself from pain, and like it's actually you were supposed to go through it, and that like we're supposed to endure terrible election cycles. We're supposed to endure these crazy things in our lives that make us stronger. And it just got me thinking, based on our discussion earlier, about what you might be dealing with, what I might be dealing with, what our listeners and commenters in the comment section, what they might be dealing with, and how we come to deal with that stuff. How we come to a better a place of acceptance, healing, transcendence, a place of where we can deal with that kind of stuff and then move on. I don't know. What are some strategies that you've used?
Well, I think that it's critical to find a sense of purpose. And that's purpose, not porpoise. That's a marine mammal. Purpose. Having a sense of purpose. Having a sense of I am contributing in a positive way to whatever it is that you might be contributing to. Simply because when we are looking after others, we instantly feel better about ourselves. There's something truly incredible about our innate humanity, that if I help someone else, you feel better. And having that sense of purpose, I think, is possibly one of the greatest strategies to cope with the difficulties, with everything. It is interesting simply because if you step back and you try to just focus inward only, it may not yield the same result that you wish.
It sounds like you have a lot of experience with this.
Oh boy, all the time.
Yeah.
But it's something that that we all have experience with.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, what's very important to understand, we were talking about a number of different individuals who may have been placed in a position of authority because they offer some really good points, perhaps, but then they stray away from their original path, what have you. It is important to remember not to diminish that hurt, the pain, not to trivialize it, but to acknowledge it. Because whatever level of, whether they be issues or whatever level of pain you're dealing with, it is your worst thing that you can deal with at that moment. For you individually, it's the worst thing that can happen. And I kind of speak from experience. I remember there was a test years ago, way back in like 5th grade, and this is where I learned that lesson. I was always an average student. So if I got a C, I would be the happiest kid you have ever met in your life, right? I would go home and be like, I got a C. And my parents would just be like, oh, another C.
Another C.
Yeah. But I remember speaking to a student who had straight A's. But unfortunately, on that same test, that student ended up getting a C, as did I. I was elated, whereas that other student was completely broken.
Right.
Simply because, again, as you mentioned, we create our own worst nightmare. Therefore, we are responsible for our own happiness.
That's right. And I stole that. That's Buddha and Stoics and whatnot.
Yes.
I stole that from them. And we all do. We all steal that stuff from them.
But it's too easy to say, well, you're dealing with that, comparatively speaking, to someone who has X problem. Why are you even upset? Well, to that person, at that moment, this is the worst thing that has happened. And it's easy to trivialize. It's easy to diminish. Instead of having a sufficient amount of empathy and just acknowledging the pain for what it is.
Yeah.
It is still
Yeah.
pain.
It's pain. And then in and of itself, I know I've been listening to some of the more Alan Watts podcasts somewhat and some of his lectures. For those of you that don't know, in the interwebs out there, now you got me saying it, interwebs, this guy Alan Watts, he's one of these, he's almost like a mystical figure that just appears. I never heard of him until the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, you have a lot of time on your hands, maybe too much, but I've started, of course you can get doom scrolling and whatnot, but I came across this guy after just coming across the Tao Te Ching and some other writings of Lao Tzu. And this guy did a series of lectures in the 1970s, 60s and 50s too, but especially in the 70s, he seems to have hit kind of this really amazing pinnacle of his thoughts and whatnot. He talks about the same exact empathy stuff that you're talking about how to let go of the anger, and how to embrace love, and how to forgive those that are truly unforgivable. But it's about more you and your place in this universe and cosmos. So for those of you out in the interwebs out there, if you check this guy out, Alan Watts, Watts. He was apparently affiliated somewhere with Ram Dass as well, who's another thought leader in the world of Hinduism and whatnot. But his series of lectures, he was originally, I researched a little bit about him because I was like, who is this guy? And how have I never heard of this guy? And he was originally trained, I believe, in the religious traditions. I believe it was as a pastor. I could be wrong. Maybe it was a priest. I think it was a pastor, but eventually did that for a few years, but just is one of these true seekers of deeper truth and knowledge. So for him, the Christian worldview, the Abrahamic worldview, just wasn't enough. It just didn't offer a big enough understanding of what he was seeing and experiencing and everything else. So he leaves and goes to the East and begins this journey into Taoism, into Buddhism, into the traditions of Shintoism. And what he begins to see, he's this beautiful melding, this guy, of the West and all of our highly structured religious traditions, like all that stuff, and academia and credentials and all that stuff that just, it confines you, and
Probably even scientific method.
the scientific method, deep scientific thinker, understands science. He would never purport to be a scientist himself, but he could read the papers and spoke eloquently about, in the time in the 50s, about nuclear physics, and
Wow.
he understood these things.
Yeah.
It was actually had conversed with some of these people, like apparently Oppenheimer. I mean, he had actually conversed with the people to inform his worldview. But then he has this beautiful, beautiful blending, like the yin yang. He's the beautiful blending of this Eastern tradition, and I wouldn't say so much mysticism. That's not it. But metaphysicalism or something where he speaks at length about where science stops, where science can't go, where science doesn't have the ability yet, or maybe ever, to actually tread into these territories of the human heart and the soul and things like this. And so he's just this beautiful blending of both those traditions. And in that tradition, one of his best lectures is about how to let go, how to just, and this comes from Lao Tzu, and he'd be the first to say, I didn't come up with this, Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi and Confucius, and these guys came up with ways to see the world where when you're enraged inside or you have that pain inside, finding places of solace to just sit there and stare at that fireball of rage that you've got, or of depression or disappointment, and then how to not judge it, but just let it sit there, and to look at it, and to you almost begin to distance yourself a little bit from it, because the second that you can take it out, think about it, reflect on it, you've already done, it's already, the fire is already out of your heart. The burning passion is already out if you can do that, if you can take a look at that tradition. It reminds me of the story in the Buddhist tradition of like Mara, who's the great tempter of Buddha, and offers Buddha sex, power, lust, women, gold, rage. Rage is a huge one. But eventually the Buddha is able to, sitting under the Bodhi tree, he's able to withstand that, and just touches the earth and realize that all the world and its pain is all the world and my pain. It's deep metaphysical stuff that I struggle with all the time, because it's hard, right? You live at this level in your brain, and then you hit the roads on Monday morning, and you're back in the grind, right? You're fighting with the other rats to get to the rat race, to earn the money, to provide for your family, to take care of your kids, to provide for a pension, to make sure you don't become homeless, to pay for the damn car, to be able to touch on your animals and love on and provide rings and material possessions like computers and stuff for your loved ones. And yet there's this whole other universe that we never even acknowledge, especially in the Western world, right? I mean, we have an issue here in America. We have an issue in this country with clearly not being able to be in touch with what we think, what we feel, right? We're told from the time I was born, I remember being, not necessarily from my family, because my dad was a musician, because he was always in touch with his anger, but also his musical traditions. Just, like you never show your emotion, you hold things in, and you must control at all times those feelings that might make you angry or cry or laugh. Or I remember that viscerally, even being a kid, growing up in the K-12 system as well, public education, to show fear. Oh, made you a target in 5 seconds, yeah. Very interesting.
So as we close the chapter, lend us your ear. The Prime Directive's calling, so let's pass a beer. To where the laughter's alive, society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and culture